Everybody, it's Wednesday, and it's not the last Wednesday of the month, which you know what that means. It's time for another episode of For Whom the Bell Tolls. Now, this week we've got an incredible guest. I'm very excited about this guest. We're going to find out all kinds of things about him. I want to thank everybody who's here with us live. I want to thank every one of you who's on Team Replay. If you are on Team Replay, add hashtag Team Replay in the comments below. I need to know who's on Team Replay. And of course, if you are watching in another part of the world, I know I've been saying this a lot, but it's actually coming to fruition. Let me know what country and time zone you're in so I can try to figure out how to get some For Whom the Bell Tolls in your time zone. But we're not here to talk about you guys in another time zone. We're here to talk about somebody who's in my time zone, the greatest time zone, the central time zone. See,
Agreed.
How many BookTube channels do you ever come on where they're like pumping up the central time zone?
We should normalize it because it is the best time zone.
This is the kind of quality programming you've come to love and respect here at BookTube. I want to welcome in Josh from Red Fury Books. Josh, how are you tonight?
I'm great. I'm excited to be on here. I mean, I've really enjoyed watching your channel. You know, you're only 6 months old, but it's been really cool. 6 months in, I mean, you are just killing it on your channel. I love that you just have a very, very unique voice, and just already you're just doing such great things. I know my channel at 6 months did not look anything like what you're doing. So I'm really excited to be here and talk with you.
Thank you. As a matter of fact, I watched some of your videos from when you were 6 months old today. So we're going to, we'll have some things to talk about. I'd like to do some research. Before we get into the Josh conversation, I have to shout out some of you guys who are participating in chat because you really bring the life to the conversation. All the way from New Zealand. You love her, you love her, you love her. You can't get enough. Dairy, thank goodness. Nope, thank goodness you're here. Sarah Beth, hello. Andy, hello. Anitha, hello. And by the way, Alan, you pronounce her last name Gade. Anitha Gade, just like that. And actually the TH, you have to do it correctly as well. All right, Darko's here. Michael's here. Uh-oh, trouble. There's trouble in River City.
Love it.
I am hoping for a piano and trumpet duet this evening. I think we probably need to practice that. We've got Chris Navos here. Hello. Heidi, 6 months squared is BellTube. Brent is here, another great dude. And one of the more well-read people on the BookTubes, Daniel, is here. And honestly, this is like, if I was going to do a top 10 huggable hosts of BookTube, Ben from Genghis Khan would make the top 10 most I think Petrick wins hands down. Number one is the most huggable BookTuber. All right, we've said hi to chat. Let's talk to Josh a little bit. Josh, it looks to me like you started your channel right around about when the pandemic was hitting the nation in the world. Is that right?
That's about right. A little bit after I started thinking about it, because that's actually the pandemic is when I started watching BookTube.
Okay.
I didn't know it existed. And then I had all this free time on my hands. Once we locked down kind of that spring break, I had 3 months we were teaching virtually, but we weren't allowed to be synchronous. So I had about an hour of work and I had the full day. So I was watching a lot of YouTube and discovering a lot of the channels and everything. And then I got in my head, well, maybe I'll do this. And then it took me quite some time before I actually had the guts to turn the camera on and start talking. But it was kind of tail end of it. And, the biggest reason that I wanted to do it is I literally told myself I wanted to have something tangible to show that I did during the pandemic. Not just that I could make a mean Manhattan, which I can't.
Right.
Can you? I wanted to do something, and I started doing a little bit of writing. That didn't go so well.
Yeah.
But I just thought, you see a lot of these channels, and it's just, there's the big channels that obviously are just really, really good at this. But a lot of the channels are just like kind of the everyman. And I thought, well, maybe I can do this. So I thought I'd do it for 6 months, and then, well, here I am. It's been
there you are.
Years.
Well, and the funny part is I watched your very first video today. And by the way, Matt, thank you very much for
Hey,
the
Matt.
super chat. Very cool. Josh is the man, and it is my pleasure to host. And Matt, thank you for the generous super chat. Um, yeah, so I watched your first video today, and I liked how you said, "Let's roll the intro," and then you had a crickets going on in the background because there was no intro. Because then you said, "Folks, I don't even really have a channel yet. I don't even
Yeah,
know if I'm gonna make a channel. I'm just talking into the camera right now." And it's awesome. I mean, in the lighting, you had no idea. I mean, you're like the dude
clueless.
with like a dark room with the flashlight, underneath his
Pretty
face,
much.
telling ghost stories. But the content was still good. So I mean, right off the rip, I think you had something. How did you come up with the name Red Fury? Had you
So Red Fury was I used to be a competitive distance runner, and
okay?
I got that name as a runner because I tended to be the runner that would kind of break people's hearts in the last mile because I always finished strong in my races. And
Okay.
a friend of mine just coined it. We were at a race one time, and it was a short race, and I picked off like three high school kids in the last mile, and he was like, "Man, like the red fury," and I said, "Okay, I kind of like that." It just kind of stuck. So, yeah,
Absolutely. Because I was thinking, like, was this his band, or was he super pissed off one day and he's just like furious and gonna get a this? Yeah, sort of like Furious in the First Law.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, right, exactly.
Philip's ability to remember characters. I mean, my brain is a sieve. I'm struggling to remember what I just finished this morning. Meanwhile, Philip, probably read this, 6 years ago. Boom,
I
boom,
I
boom.
struggle with character names. Yeah, I remember a lot of the essence of the character and can tell you all about them, but I don't always remember the names. I kind of stink at that. So
Yeah.
until I
I
hear it, and then I remember very well. But yeah,
Do
I'm
you
not.
ever take notes when you're reading? Because I'm for sure not a note taker.
Only when I was reading Malazan, and when I get back to it in July, I'm going to be doing the same thing. It was actually Matt had the advice on one of his videos talking about, because of all the characters, just at the end of each chapter, just kind of jot down real quick where that character is so that you can remember if they don't appear for like several hundred pages. And that did help me quite a bit in Dead House Gates, because that book was so long. So, but that's
Yeah.
it. I don't really take notes. The only notes I take is if I'm reading a short story collection, I usually jot down a note after each short story just to, like, if I'm going to talk about it, to remember just the names of them and which
Mhm.
ones were the ones I liked most. But no, I don't want reading to feel like homework for me.
Right.
So I
Right.
just like to read.
Yeah, and that's the same for me too. It's like I've never been a note taker when I read, so I didn't want to all of a sudden change this incredible passion of mine to make a channel. So, but for other people, they do it because they want to remember very specific phrases or key moments because it impacted them so hard that they will make a note of it or put some sort of a post-it to go back to later. So, what was the first book that you can recall that sort of turned you on to either reading, or these genres that we tend to hang out in? And as a matter of fact, you're probably the most diverse reader that I've had on the channel in terms of genre and the broad scope of what you read.
Yeah, I do. For me, I've talked about it several places before. I've never experienced a reading slump, and I
Hmm.
think one of the reasons is that I go in between so many different genres. You read a book of epic fantasy that's like huge, and it's all about world building and a billion characters and all that, and then I follow it up with like a quick, fast-paced work of crime fiction, and it's just a
Sure.
nice, just kind of a mental stimulus, or people call it a palate cleanser, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And it works really well for me. As for some formative books, I talked about, for fantasy genre, the first thing I ever read was the Chronicles of Prydain, and I hope I
Okay.
said it right. I always forget, by Lloyd Alexander.
Okay.
But my first book series that I ever remember, and I remember I was very proud in elementary school, I finished and I read every single book in the Hardy Boys Mysteries.
Excellent. Well,
Every
they
single one in my elementary library. I don't know how many there were, like 40 of them or something like that. And I love those. It wasn't until I was almost done that I realized that there were only like three plots that they kept kind of
right.
recycling. But
Right.
I was a kid, and it was just like, oh, give me more of this. And I think that fueled my love for book series and long book series for sure.
Right. And it definitely had to fuel the fire for crime fiction, which would come much later, and
Yeah.
mystery books and things of that. That's
Yeah.
that's really interesting. And you're for sure the first person that I've asked that has had more of a mystery type of a series that drew them into reading. When you're looking at today in your TBR, when you make a this is what I'm going to read type of a video, or when you're planning it out, what goes into the thought for you? Like, because do you follow the trends of BookTube? Do you have your own taste that you really get into? Because I've noticed you sort of follow your own, path.
Yeah. I try not to read the thing that everybody's reading. And that's conscious, and maybe that's just my own just individualized independence that like permeates my life. But I don't tend to fall into those as much.
Sure.
Um, but I mean, when there's a big release out, like everybody else, I'll be reading Wind and Truth as soon as it comes
Right.
out,
Right.
big ones like that. But no, I mean, I tend to structure my month based on making sure I at least read three genres.
Hmm.
And this year, I'm kind of trying to prioritize. I have a lot of book series that I want to read, at least start. Some continue, some finish, some read in their entirety. So that kind of forms kind of the structure around it. But like when I sketch out a month, I pretty much just throw out like 5 books, and I'll put a couple book series, make sure I have a couple different genres in there. And then I always leave room kind of at the end of the month to just go off the schedule and read what I'm just feel like reading, just to have a little bit of mood reading, and amidst all that structure for me works pretty well.
Do you find that having that structure just to begin with is useful for you? Has that been something that you've done prior to starting Red Fury books?
No, this came out of having the channel, and
Hmm.
a lot of it came out of I had to start structuring because two things. One, I bought too many books. Like most of us, we see all these books and we keep
Right.
ordering, and then all of a sudden I got shelves of unread books.
Yeah.
That was part of it, and then the buddy reads start happening, so
Sure.
that forms a lot of structure when well, this month I'm reading this with this person, and this month I'm reading with this person. So I found I had to do just put together a spreadsheet just to keep track of everything. And I like it because I'm someone who I like a lot of structure anyway.
Okay.
I wish my physical TBR were smaller, but I'm working on it. But it's the structure helps, but even having just a little bit of flexibility each month keeps it fresh as well. So that like when I get through those 5 books, I usually have anywhere from like 4 days to 10 days at the end of the month to say, hey, what do I feel like reading right now?
Sure.
And that helps again keep it fresh as well, because whatever I'm interested in most will happen at the end of the month for sure.
You know, if I'm recalling, correct me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you are fine doing audiobooks as well, right? Or some
Yes, I
genres in
do.
audiobooks?
I don't do epic fantasy audiobooks. I do about one a month.
Okay.
And I found that there's certain audiobooks that work for me and certain ones that I've just stopped and add the book back to my list because I didn't like the narrator or whatever. Um, I don't I do it about once a month on average. And it's just kind of during my commute or if I'm cleaning or something like that. I don't make it a priority. I just like holding the book and seeing the words. And I
Right.
also feel that with an audiobook, sometimes you're at the mercy of the narrator and how well they interpret the text. So it's almost like you're getting someone's interpretation of the
It's
text
filtered.
rather than your own.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I that bothers me a little bit. So kind of my only rules, epic fantasy, just because there's so many characters to keep track of, I don't do, and I
Sure.
don't want to do a 30-hour book.
Yeah.
And I also don't want to read an author for the first time audio. I like to do that on the page. Um,
Interesting.
so I'm a little different with that. I don't do quite as much as a lot of people do. I know my book count could probably go up if I did more audiobooks, but
I think it just sort of depends on where you would do the audiobooks. Like if you were driving, yeah, fine. But like at your day-to-day job, you can't be sitting and listening to audiobooks.
yeah,
So those would not be found hours of reading that you could do, in the audio sense like that.
yeah, not at all.
Man, but no, I appreciate the fact that you can do some. I've talked to so many people who just don't do any audiobooks at all. And for me, that has made my TBR actually manageable. The fact that I can do it, but I'm with you. I don't do huge epic fantasy in that regard. I don't do big space opera for the exact same reasons as huge epic fantasy. And yeah, Derry makes a great point. A good narrator is key to Audible.
Yeah.
There's some books that, if I found a narrator that I just really fall in love with their skill level, I gravitate to their audiobook just because I feel like you said, you are getting their interpretation of it. But I think once you
Yeah.
build up a trust with a narrator in the same sort of way that you might have a favorite author that you trust to lead you where you want to go, they can elevate that written word in kind of a better way for me sometimes than just reading it. But
Yeah, no, no, I get that. And well, like Ben's in the chat. I know he had a video, two videos, I think, where he did like his top 10
mhm,
audiobook narrators.
yeah.
And I think that's very valid because one audiobook narrator I've discovered is James Marsters doing
Oh,
the
yeah.
Prison Files.
Yeah.
He's fantastic.
Fantastic.
I think he I mean, granted, I started with the fourth audiobook when the series was getting better, but I felt he
Yeah.
elevated the material quite
Yeah.
a bit from where it was before.
He does, and you really get a sense that he is Harry Dresden. I mean,
And I always thought he had an English accent because he was Spike.
right, right. Isn't that so surprising? It's like, and it's like the guy who plays. I don't know if you saw the show Daredevil on Netflix when that was on, and the guy who plays Daredevil is actually British. But I had no idea till he actually started talking. I was like, what is this guy coming from? So we're going to be all over the place, folks. I've got a lot of questions for Josh, and we're on BookTube right now. We're going to get off of BookTube, then we're going to go back to BookTube. But while we're still here and we're talking about some of your reading, are there elements that you focus on both as a reader and as a BookTube reviewer that you find yourself thinking about more? Like, are you a character reader? Are you more of a plot reader? Does it depend on the genre that you're reading?
I think it depends on the genre for me. I think in fantasy, the two things are character and world building. But when I'm reading crime fiction, I mean, it's all about the plot. It's really all
Yeah.
about the plot. A lot of times it's all about the themes behind the plot as well. So it's really genre specific for me when I'm reading. I know that with my reading, I know that I'm a different reader because of BookTube, because I know that I have to, at least in my wrap up, talk about each book for about 2 minutes,
Right.
which I filmed this month's wrap up. I talked a lot longer. I got a little
Isn't
verbose
isn't
today.
that crazy how you look at these videos and you're like, "I just talked for 10 minutes," and you're like, "No, I didn't. I just talked for
Right?
35 minutes." Yeah.
But yeah, it's for me, I don't know. I value different things from different authors. You know, when
Sure.
I'm reading Brandon Sanderson, I'm not reading him for his prose. I'm reading him for his imagination and his world and his characters. Whereas when I'm reading a Guy Gavriel Kay, you know,
Mhm.
all those things are present, but the prose is a big part of it too. So
It sure
I
is.
think it varies not only for me with by genre, but by author. Just knowing that there are different approaches. In fact, thinking of those two, I did a video like a month ago, I think, where I did a kind of compare and contrast with Tigana and Tress of the Emerald Sea, talking about how these are two really great fantasy
Mhm.
standalones where the approach couldn't be more different and just shows that they
Absolutely.
worked. They both worked. And it was really great for me. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is I just think a little differently, knowing I have to talk about these books in a somewhat coherent manner at the end of the month.
Yeah, right?
I try to make sure I'm formulating my thoughts, as I get through a book.
Right, and you do. I mean, I get away with a little bit because 'cause I'll throw in stupid characters and I could be goofy and zany, but you're for the most part, I'm not gonna say serious because your channel is fun, but your approach is certainly more of an educator because that is your nature. That it
Yeah.
would be it would be weird for you to not be somewhat of an educator on your videos. Same with, Dr. Chase as well. But so when you've got your viewership out there, I'm wondering if you can think of any particular interaction that you may have had with a viewer that you found particularly rewarding in a way, whether it be a comment or something in a chat or I
Oh,
don't know.
I mean, a lot of them. I mean, that's one of the reasons I kept doing this. I mean, I love just not to single out a certain one, but anytime that someone comments on a video, like an older video, and said,
Mhm.
"I watched this video and you made the recommendation, and I love this book." Like my biggest single book review is Shogun. It
Sure.
hit like 10,000 views, something like
Okay.
that. Which,
Great.
single book reviews don't do well, but over
Right.
time, a lot of them might gain some steam. And
Sure.
that one, when people come back and say, "Hey, I read this because I liked your review and I really love the book. Thank you." I mean, that makes my day.
Yeah.
Know that the words that you had for a work of art that you really enjoyed and you convinced somebody else to get some enjoyment from it. It's
Uh,
certainly, I love that aspect of it. And then I love just the interaction in the comments section.
mhm.
There's a lot of people that I've learned a lot from in those comments that have a lot more depth in certain areas of reading that I do, where I've learned a lot. And I enjoy that aspect of it as well. Because even though I'm an educator, I enjoy learning above all.
Sure.
And so I love that aspect of it as well. Just, I put something out as, here is the Red Fury Books take on this, and then someone
Mhm.
has so much more depth in the comment section, and we have a little conversation, and I just
Right.
love it. I truly value it.
Yeah, I agree. I learn a ton about what I'm talking about in my own comment section. And I think in regards to Shogun, that's a great example because somebody's trusting you with a 1,300 page read. I mean, that's not, hey, I read this little short story. You should check it out.
Yeah.
Someone trusting you in a 1,300 page read. Yeah, I agree. That's a very, very cool thing. Have you had any authors, and you must have at this point because of the development and just the incredible amount of self-published books that have come out. Have you had any authors that have responded to any of your reviews, critiques, criticisms, praise, whatnot?
Yes. Well, Andy was in the chat earlier. I don't know if he's still there. I was very honored that he asked me to be an alpha reader for his trilogy that's coming out this year, and that was a very neat process. I was honored and flattered that he valued my opinion
Sure.
and
Have you
be
done
able
that
to.
before for anybody?
I had not done that specifically, and to be able to just, my approach was basically I read it and gave him kind of my big, you know, overview kind of thoughts that I would give if I were reviewing it. Although I did
Mhm.
it kind of chapter to chapter, and it was really neat to be thanks Andy. It was really neat to just be on that side of things, because as I said, I've tried to write here and there and I'm not very good at it. I know it's not a strength of mine, but just that, some of the thoughts were of value.
Mhm.
Another instance, in one of my monthly wrap ups a couple months ago, back when I was still doing star ratings, I've dumped those, but I gave a self pub book 2 out of 5, and I talked about, why I gave it that, and I think I was pretty thorough with my assessment. But of course, I was very respectful of the author. This is their thing, and I even said in the video, like, "Hey, this is my opinion. Someone else might like it." And
Sure.
the author actually responded and said, he really appreciated a lot of my feedback and was actually looking at maybe restructuring some of the book based on what I did. And I was flattered for that as well, because I feel that, especially, and it's just kind of my background as a musician. When I'm a
Mhm.
judge, if I'm giving a lower rating for something, I'm always a lot more thorough to make sure that the feedback is constructive and concrete. So a lot of times in my monthly wrap ups, I'll gush about a book for 90 seconds. And then the book that I don't like as much, I may talk for 5 or 6 minutes, because I just want to
Right.
make sure that my feedback is very concrete, respectful, and constructive.
Yeah, I've not ever seen you crap on books. It's just not who you are. It's not your style. Um, I think that that's why, like I said, I had gone back and I had seen some of your older videos today, but the one of the interesting thing was in a lot of the comments and a lot of them, I see some of the same names that I still see today in the chat right now with us live. Also, just, that are part of your fireside Discord. Some of these folks have been around with you basically since the inception of your journey, you're very close to it, which is really impressive to me that you've been able to build and maintain such a loyal group of friends that are here for really whatever you put out in a meaningful way, and they engage. So that's really cool. You brought it up. Let's shift gears for a second. Don't worry, folks. We will get back to books, but you got two musicians on the line here. So we got to talk about this a little bit. Mr. Josh, what was your first instrument and how old were you?
Piano, age 3.
Really?
And
How?
I don't remember, but I know it was age 3 because there's a picture of me at the piano. Apparently, the story goes, again, I don't remember any of this. My grandmother played,
Okay.
and we lived with my grandparents when my folks divorced.
Okay.
And one day I just started sitting by her. And then at one point I just started playing. I
Sure.
don't remember any of this. So like my whole life, I don't remember learning to read because I've been done it forever. And I don't remember learning to read music either because it's just something I've always done.
How do you
Yeah,
remember about how old you must have been when you learned to read music?
it had to have been around that time because there's
Jeez.
a picture my uncle took, and I was a bit older. I bet I was 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And you can see I have my finger and I'm like looking up at I'm looking at the music, and you can just tell that I am reading the music. I'm not just mimicking the motion. So um yeah,
Did your grandmother teach you that?
she kind of did. And then apparently I surpassed her. She was very much the amateur,
Sure.
and she picked up the piano because my grandfather was a band director, and
Okay. Oh,
she wanted to kind of understand, what he is as a musician.
sure.
So, but my earliest music making was not with him; it was with her,
Wow.
which is pretty cool.
So you've got it in your genes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I kind of went into the family business.
That's really cool. You see, I thought I was young. I was 7, and to me,
That's still young.
it was young, but not 3. For all I know, I could have been 3. My mom watches this; she'd probably be able to tell. But maybe I was banging around. But I never had lessons until I was 7.
Yeah,
But it was different for me because the guy that they hired to teach me was a teenage, guy in a rock band. So I was not learning classical at 7. I was learning how
yeah,
to play Elton and Barry Manilow and Al Stewart and Billy Joel and just
nice.
all this stuff at 7, which was bonkers, and The Entertainer, I think. But so you started piano. Did you maintain playing piano for a long period of time? Do you still play?
Um, yes, no, yes.
Okay.
I played and I took lessons until I was about 10 or 12, and then I
Okay.
had the grand idea. I quit piano so I could play soccer, and
Sure.
that lasted 2 years.
Yeah. But that's at least with a
Yeah.
group of guys. I
Yeah,
mean, a
right?
little bit more fun. Yeah.
But then in high school, I picked it back up because when I realized I was going to be a music major, I knew that every music major has to play piano.
Yeah.
So I had to get back into it. I started taking lessons again, 10th or 11th grade year. And then I've played it ever since. I finally do have a piano again at the house. I didn't have one for many, many years, but I do have one at school that I could always play. But I do
Sure.
have one in the room, and I don't play every day, but I play at least every week, and it's more just for my own enjoyment.
Absolutely. I'm assuming when you took those lessons in high school, it must have been classical.
Yeah, for the most part, but I was also into Billy Joel, so sometimes
Yeah.
I would bring in, some sheet music and say, "Hey, can you teach me this one?"
Sure. Absolutely. Now it's like you can just look at it and you got it.
Yeah.
So, but your main instrument is it trumpet?
Yeah, I was a trumpet major in college. So
You
yeah.
were a trumpet major in college. Now, you are absolutely the first trumpet major in college I've ever talked to in my entire life. When did you start playing trumpet?
5th grade.
Same
And
here.
yeah, and it was because my grandfather was a trumpet player, so that's what I was going to play. And it worked out great because I had a great trumpet player as a private teacher, all the way through
Sure.
school, 5th grade through 12th grade. And all the difference in the world because, a lot of times when you take private lessons, you have kind of that time frame. And we
Mhm.
didn't have a time frame. We'd do the lesson and then we'd keep playing. And, I often had really long lessons with him because we were just enjoying spending time together.
Well,
So
right, and you live there too. So, At least, for some of
Hmm.
that, I would imagine. So,
Actually, at that point, my mother had gotten remarried, so we didn't
okay,
live together, but we were in the same neighborhood, so it wasn't like we were far apart.
you could go, right. I mean, it wasn't like you're just going to see the teacher who shows up for their 45 minutes once a week
Exactly.
and, quick cram everything in that morning. So it looks like you actually practiced, during the week while they were gone. So you started trumpet at in fifth grade. I was the same because that was the first year you could be in band. And
Yeah.
was it like that for you too? That was really the first, year in elementary school that you were allowed to, pick up a horn instrument?
It was 5th grade for band, and then you go to the middle school, and then there's, of course, middle school band after that. So, but yeah, 5th grade was the year that you could kind of take it as a class, and I don't think it was every day. I think it was like 2 or 3 days a week where, the band director from the middle school would be down there to teach us. But, I had a built-in teacher at home, so I excelled pretty quickly.
Sure. Yeah, that's incredible. So, what kind of music on the trumpet is really your passion? Do you have a particular flavor, genre?
As a performer, my favorite thing to do is to play Broadway musicals.
Really?
Yeah, it's the most mentally engaging thing I've ever done in my life. Because
That's
it's often like a 3-hour show.
sure.
We have about 100 pages of music. You never have a lot of rehearsal time. You're often basically feeling like every night you're sight reading the book because you haven't had a lot of rehearsal time. And
Right.
it's live theater, things happen. You
Sure.
have to be flexible. The set change lasts longer or it's quicker, or a
Right.
singer skips like 2 verses and you got to jump ahead. And it is the most mentally engaging thing I've ever done, and I love it. I just love that. There's probably nothing in my life I've ever had to do more is focus more when playing those shows, and it's just that's always been a lot of fun for me.
That's really cool. Heidi, actually one of our patrons, had asked a question in our Patreon if you played jazz at all and if you'd ever,
I
played in
do,
jazz
yeah.
bands and stuff.
Yeah, I have. I played a lot of jazz. My undergrad, the jazz program was kind of legendary there, and I got to play there. And then grad school as well, I played with the jazz ensemble there, and then a lot of gigs along the way as well. But yeah,
I have to say, and by the way, thank you, Slave, for the super chat. Josh is awesome. Thank you for bringing him on. Of course. Well, thank you, Josh, for
thanks,
coming
man.
on. Got a question for both of you. What are some albums that you've replayed countless times? Rock on. That's a good question.
I mean, pick a genre.
Right.
So, we're talking trumpet. My favorite jazz album is Herbie Hancock's Maiden Voyage,
Okay.
which Freddie Hubbard is just sublime on that recording. I've worn
When
that.
was that recorded?
Oh, I have no idea. 50s,
60s?
60s, probably
Yeah.
60s, probably
Yeah.
60s. Yeah, Wayne Shorter, and I mean, it's just it's an incredible recording. That's probably my favorite jazz album. Um, Probably one of my Billy Joel albums would be the most that I've played in, the rock and pop range. I
Sure.
don't know which one, but any of them.
Yeah. He's got some horn.
Stranger, probably.
Sure. I mean, he's got quite a bit of horn on 52nd Street.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, you
Actually,
know,
that's Freddie Hubbard on that take.
is it
Same
really?
trumpet player it is, yeah. Yeah.
See, and I learned something. Zanzibar's got a great trumpet,
Yep, yep,
line
good
in
for him.
there. Man, very, very cool. Yeah. So yeah, I am jealous of the fact that you could gig with the trumpet because you're carrying a case and maybe some music and probably that's it. Is
Yeah.
that about it?
Yeah, yep.
Oh man, back in the day, I was schlepping, big old digital keyboards, and my cousin had a Hammond organ with a Leslie
Yeah.
speaker, and you know, amazing that I wasn't, in traction after schlepping that stuff around, in Minnesota in January.
That's like
But
every kid in the band that played tuba wished they play the flute for the
oh
same.
yeah, right. I mean, fitting the tuba in the school locker. I don't know if they could even do that. I think Heidi's asking about yeah, dairy, meatloaf, bat out of hell, of course. Yeah, definitely gonna get into some music here. Darko played trumpet in elementary school. So
Nice.
here's why I started trumpet, because in fourth grade, where I was, you could be in the orchestra. And my parents decided I should play violin. And I have no idea why. I had no interest in violin. So to me, the trumpet was an escape to get out of playing violin in the 5th grade, and that's
Yeah.
when I went to it. And, you know, if you guys are unaware, in bands, and I don't know if it's like this, I'm guessing it probably is professionally, you'll be able to tell us that there's, you know, the different chairs, 1st chair, 2nd chair, 3rd chair, in terms of really ability on the instrument. My chair on the trumpet was like somewhere down the hall, you know, around the corner, with starting with the letter Z. I was horrible at the trumpet. And then in the 6th grade, I started playing electric guitar. So it was like, all right, this will be a little
You
bit.
found your voice.
Yeah, and I never really stopped playing piano, but until
Yeah,
BookTube. I mean,
yeah.
when you talk about not playing every day, but you play every week, up until BookTube, I played every day almost my whole life,
Wow.
certainly my adult life. And even if it was only 5 or 10 minutes a day, I'm just a big person about habits and that they compound. And if you don't use it, you'll lose your chops. And man, that has been the one thing since starting the channel for me. Chop wise, when I sit down, it's a disaster. I sat down, I was trying to play some Steely Dan yesterday, and I was like, yeah, Brian, think you need a little bit of practice again, man. So not only do you play, but obviously you are a conductor. And I would like to know, what is it like to conduct? You know, to be in charge. If you could explain to us really what a conductor does, because I think a lot of people don't know. They see a guy standing there. He's got the conductor's, is a baton? Is
Mhm.
that, what do we
It's a
call it?
baton,
It's a
yeah.
baton. And but we don't really know what a conductor does. Could you walk us through that a little bit? Like
Sure. So there's
the prep
yeah,
and then the live?
yeah, there's 2 sides of it. There's
Yeah,
the preparation for performance and then the actual performance. The preparation for performance depends on what level of musicians you're working with. You
sure.
know, if I'm stepping in front of the Berlin Philharmonic, there's not much that I have to do because they're gonna sound amazing in spite of me.
Right.
But I have a truly fantastic high school orchestra. Even with them, I'm just doing a lot of teaching, and I try to teach a lot like a lot of basically a lot how my college professors taught me because my group is pretty advanced, but with different levels, you're doing a lot of different kind of teaching. So that side of it is different. The actual performance is you are providing physical leadership for the ensemble. And if I had to sum it up in one word, it's empowering because you don't make a sound.
Right.
You're in front, but you initiate and you prepare the sounds. And especially when you have an ensemble that can change things that they do based on the physical gestures that you show them, it's a lot of fun. It really is a lot of fun. It's fun the times in performances where I knew my group was good enough that if I felt we should do something a little differently that they could follow. And it's a lot of fun, but it is empowering because you have to realize that conductor doesn't make a sound.
Right.
They're in front and they're empowering the musicians to give a great performance based on what they do with their gestural
A,
language.
a physical presence and the
Yeah.
confidence that you've prepped them, that if they're not sure, they can look up and get that boost of confidence.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, your ear must be exceptional to be able to pull out different parts of the ensemble and see what needs what in
Mhm.
the exact moment that it needs it. Because you
Yeah.
have, I mean, you're living in real time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've
Yeah.
got an audience, you know, behind you. You must have to be able to real time. Whoop, this isn't sounding the way
Yeah.
that I know these guys can make this sound. We've
Yeah.
done the prep. Um, that's just incredible. Hello, Jimmy Nuts. I think
Hey,
we
Jimmy.
talked about you a little bit earlier. I don't remember. But so on that, is there a particularly challenging piece of music that you think about that might be your more difficult piece to conduct?
Well, it would depend. There's certain pieces that I'll probably never do just
Okay.
because I won't be able to step into in front of a professional orchestra. For instance, Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. You know,
Okay.
that's not a piece you can do with even the greatest of high school orchestras, which
Sure.
um, it's just not possible. So really, it's just on the level that we're on.
Right.
I'm fortunate where I am that we can keep pushing and raising the bar. We played a finale of a Brahms symphony this year, which a lot of high school groups can't do very well because it's just so challenging. So I wouldn't single out any piece, because it's also
Sure.
one of those too. Like every time with my students, I raise the bar, they just say how high. So
That's awesome.
um,
Have
yeah,
you had students that have gone on to study music in college and
I have, and
to
I have a few in the profession, and I have a lot of students that still play. My community, most of my students end up being doctors and engineers,
okay.
but a lot of them are still, still playing as they go through college and all of that. And sometimes some of them might get an undergrad in music and then go to med school or something like that.
Sure.
But yeah, the musicians that I have, a lot of them become lifelong musicians, but they don't make it their vocation.
Right. But that's just incredible. That's got to be a great feeling though when you get a kid graduating and they tell you, "Hey, I'm, going to major in music, or I'm going to study this particular instrument at the collegiate level and beyond." For you as an educator, that's got to be a dream come true that you have somehow transferred some of your passion into, a new generation, because it's musical instruments when we were that age, it was a much bigger thing, at least it seems like to me, than it is right now. There was just a
Yeah,
lot.
there's a lot more distractions and a lot
Yeah,
more options for kids.
right.
Growing up, we didn't have robotics and we didn't have all of these engineering courses and things like that.
Or
And
the internet.
yeah, so it is gratifying, and it's even better though when a student that you're still going to teach a little bit longer. Like I had a student that's a sophomore that I do one-on-one interviews at the end of each school year and talk about the next year and goal setting and things like that. And this kid, I asked him if he had any goals, and he says, "I want to be a music major." So it's going to be great over the next, couple years to help mentor that kid and do whatever we can to try to put him on the path that he's going to be successful in college. So that side of it is exciting as well.
I would think so. Now, I know that you have traveled to Japan to do some conducting as well.
Yeah.
Now, is that with your group that you have here, or is that with groups that are there already? How does
Yeah,
that
that
work?
was just me. I was just hired to conduct a band in Tokyo. And
How does that happen? That's awesome. Can you
that
tell
was
us about
that was
that?
that was one of those where I got nominated, and then I was somehow a finalist because they like to bring in an international conductor. So for Japan,
Sure.
an American's an international, right?
Absolutely.
And I was just flattered to be on the list. And then when they said make finals, I was happy to be on the short list. And then when they offered me the gig, I was just flabbergasted. Even I was on the plane and I said, "Am I really flying to Japan to conduct a band concert? I mean, what's going on here?"
That is awesome. Were you already familiar with what they were going to be playing, or was it something you had to learn?
A little bit of both. We kind of negotiated, and normally when I do a guest conducting job, I like to communicate with the people that know the group just to make sure that the music we pick is appropriate, especially when you're dealing with school age kids, because
Sure.
there's just the huge different levels all over the world wherever you go. I mean, most of my guest conducting's in Texas, but even so, you want to make sure that the music's not too hard or too easy. So there was a
Right.
little bit of negotiation and just helping craft the right program for us, and it worked out great. It
When
was
you
a very memorable experience.
when you started teaching and when you started conducting, how long did it take you to find that balance between not too hard and not too easy? Because I would think that that's a learned skill, for
It's
you.
Yeah, it's one of the hardest things, and you see young teachers make the mistake all the time. And I don't think there was a year. I think there were times even 10 years, 15 years into my career where I would overreach sometimes.
Sure.
And it's a hard balance because you always want to pick music that's going to challenge your students, but it has to be achievable as well. And
Right.
especially when you're dealing with like my orchestra program, I have 6 levels of orchestra. So every concert, we have to pick music for 6 different ensembles. So
Jeez.
it's easy to make little mistakes here and there. But I've definitely gotten better at it. But it's certainly a challenge. But it's certainly something that I spent a lot of time making sure that I'm choosing the right repertoire for the group to be successful.
I would say so because I would think that even at those different levels, you have to have skill levels sort of on the high end and the low end, even at your top levels, where you
Mhm.
don't want your best performers to be bored, but
Yeah.
you also don't want to lose your, not to say the least of which, but in any type of a situation, you're going to have probably more talented than some others, at least where they're at that time and place, that you don't want to frustrate somebody that they're just not having a good time anymore,
Yeah. Yeah,
because
I
it's
mean,
beyond their
that's
level.
true. Like, my top orchestra, we have 22 violinists.
Right,
If I were to rank them, I mean, my top violinist was 2nd chair in the state.
right.
22nd, I don't know if that person even made, like, our region level honor group, so
And
there's
I would, like I
definitely,
said,
like, huge
my chair
spread.
would be on the recess. My chair would be under the swing set. Um, God, did you buy when you had recess when you were my, because we're about the same. Did you have like those recess jungle gym kind of things that it's a miracle that any of us survived?
Yeah, and the thing that spun around and you'd
Right.
fly off,
Yeah, flying off.
and I think back, and it was paved. Our playground was paved, so it wasn't like you're flying off into the grass. It was flying
No,
off into concrete.
under the asphalt. Yeah, it's like monkey bars that are, and I'm a short guy. That's a long drop for me on those monkey bars. It's like, rub some dirt on it, you'll be good. Man, yeah, that's where my is. But
Yeah,
yeah, so that's awesome. So have you had an interest in Japan prior to going there?
this was my 3rd trip to Japan, actually the
Okay.
2nd one in the past year. It just worked out that way. My first trip was, probably the most memorable trip of my life. I mentioned I was a competitive distance runner, and I
Yeah.
was chosen by the city of Dallas to represent the city at a half marathon in Japan. This was about 10 years ago. And they were sister cities, and they had this big international race in Sendai, which is the north side of the country in Japan. And so I got to go kind of I was a citizen ambassador to Japan for about a week, and it was amazing. I'd never been treated so well in my life.
Yeah.
Like, when they say when you go home, that's the best you ever treated. No, the Japanese treat
Yeah.
you better.
I totally agree. So I when I got out of college, I worked for a business and we had tons of dealings with Japanese companies, and the gift giving and just all of it is just ceremonial and polite and respectful. And just all of it is fantastic. I've been doing Japanese Duolingo now for slightly over 2 years. I haven't missed a day.
Nice.
I wouldn't really recommend if anybody's watching, except for
Yeah.
you, Duolingo. If you want a sponsor, you know where to find me. But for me, it's not the greatest education way to learn it because it's just in the chunks are so small. And like I said,
Yeah.
I like chunking down my activities, but sometimes when the chunks are just too small, yeah, it's hard to make meaningful progress. And but I still love it. I mean, and you're right. What a cool society. And for the amount of people that live in Tokyo, the cleanliness of that
Yeah.
city is nuts.
Yeah, it's remarkable. But
Man.
yeah, the gift giving is incredible, and just the overall mindfulness of the people it was really special, and that extended beyond when I was a citizen ambassador, I was going to be treated well. But even beyond that, when I was just a tourist these other times in Tokyo, it was pretty special, just the way that people went out of their way to just be
Right.
mindful of you and your needs. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would love to retire there.
You never know. Hey, you could do BookTube there. Isn't like I think somebody
Hey,
isn't like Made Between the Pages. I think
she
she's
is.
been
Yeah, I think she's in Fukuoka, I think. Yeah.
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 So, I mean, it can be done, and you've already got a little bit of a resume going there, so you could
True.
do some guest conducting gigs, play some trumpets, on the mountains, go to one of the onsens with the trumpet and, provide a little meditation music for everybody.
There we go.
Uh, have there been some what is the word I'm looking for? Have there been some parallels, I guess, between music for you and literature? Have you found that have you noticed that anywhere, or have you ever thought about that? Because they are obviously two huge passions of yours that are in the arts.
Mhm.
Have you found any parallels, in that?
I would say parallels kind of in my own development, both as a reader and a reviewer. You see those parallels. Same thing with music. It's one of those. Um, I've been going back through a few of my old videos. I'm going to start a series where I pull out basically for my monthly wrap ups some of those short reviews and just call them rapid reviews. So I'm going
Mhm.
back and trying to find some good ones. And some of my early stuff, my goodness, I was incoherent. I mean,
I loved it.
I
I
watch
loved
it and
it.
I just think, man, I don't know what I'm talking about. And it's just kind of an evolution. It's one of those that, the more that you do this, obviously the
Sure.
better you're going to get. I know that I prepare a lot better for these, even though I don't script anything. I script things in my head and kind of rehearse them in my head, like if I go for a run or something like that. But even so, just seeing that progression is a lot like, progression with any skill. I mean, it is, and it's a skill. So you can learn those kinds of things. And I've learned a lot by watching a lot of channels and seeing the way that people
Sure.
deliver things. Like I love the AP's channel. I always learn so much watching his content.
Oh yeah. The
Just
the
about the
this
narrative process, because I'll be honest, my education in English and literature is lacking, to be honest. I remember the year that we were supposed to learn grammar really well, and the teacher was really into Greek mythology, and that's like all we learned. She
Sure.
was into the literature side of things, but wasn't into the other side of things. So
Right.
forever I had to kind of teach myself a lot of the rudimentary rules of grammar because of that.
Interesting. But you knew about Theseus.
Absolutely.
You could give all the Roman gods their Greek
The Greek
counterpart
and the
names.
Roman, right?
You might do well on Book Jeopardy if you ever go on Alan's show.
She taught
So
us that.
you know, uh, that's interesting. But I agree with you, both with AP and with Phil, because
Mhm.
I love, and I mentioned this in my video last week. I love the new series that they're doing. That they're
Yeah.
really breaking down how to analyze narrative stories, and in a truly professional way. That if you guys don't know, you should check it out on both of their channels. It's worth your time, especially those of you that are current booktubers or are bloggers or have aspirations to maybe do it. They give you tools that honestly you'd pay a bunch of money to college to go learn, what these 45 to 1 hour videos, 45 minutes to an hour videos teach. It's great. And they're engaging personalities, and it works for me too, because they're generally talking about genres that I really can get into. And
Yeah.
I have found that to be the case not only with my own music, but that it translates into the reading too. If they're talking about a subject that I'm interested in. So in particular, the stories they're normally talking about are like epic fantasy. Well, I love that. So I'm going to pay more attention to that than if they were talking about contemporary fiction that I don't read all that
Sure.
much of. And it was the same for me for learning music. If I was going to learn something, it had to be something that I wanted to learn how to play, rather than learn how to do this because it will increase your skill at it. That's where I kind of fumbled the ball. I hung out way too much in my own, rock and roll comfort zone.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are really great channels. I also noticed that, and now it says YouTube is interesting because sometimes it'll say your video is a year old, but maybe it's 2 years old. I don't know. It's never really exact. But you did an Ask Me Anything stream when you hit 1,000 subscribers, which according to YouTube was only about a year or so ago.
I'm
Is
not
that
sure.
right or wrong? I don't know.
So my channel grew. I have it in a note on my phone.
It's
Uh,
it's it's
my channel
bonkers.
my channel grew really slow. And I know why, because I stunk at this when I first started. Where is it? So let's see. I started in January 2021. It took me 18 months to hit 1,000. So I hit 1,000 September of 2022. So it's been about a
Wow.
year and a half, and now
About a
I'm
year
at
and a half. Now you're over 7,000.
seven. Yeah, over seven. So
Do you
and
feel like Do you feel like it's mostly because of the quality that you've gotten better at it, that you've attracted more people? Because
I
that's
think
pretty rapid. Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it. I think also when I was starting to grow, some bigger channels just gave me shout outs here and there.
Mhm.
And I think that helped a bit. And I think just like, I see your channel's grown very quickly. I think one of the reasons is that, you immediately just embrace the YouTube community.
Yeah.
And didn't even know about that at the beginning. I thought that, just like this channel, like, okay, Daniel and Murphy know each other.
Sure.
Person and this person know each other. I didn't realize there was this big community and discords and all of this stuff. So part of it was that, but I do know that, I mean, I'm still waiting to make a video where I'm like, yeah, that was a great video. I still don't think I've made one, but I do
I
think
disagree.
I think Pound for
I
Pound
find
made
I
content better than it was.
I disagree because I find great value in your videos. And
Well, thank you.
and like we were talking about, backstage, if you're on BookTube and you want to support the community, there's a real good chance that your entire feed is going to be full of BookTube videos when you go on to YouTube. And I never miss a Red Fury Books. Partly because the theme song makes me feel like I'm a superhero, and I just get fired up by his awesome theme song. No
Hey, when
lie.
I had my friend compose that, I told him, I said, I want a mixture of the Marvel theme and the music of Anton Bruckner. And that's what he
Really?
came up with, and I thought it was perfect. He had a
I
couple versions, and that's the one we liked, and, yeah, I'm forever grateful.
Oh, it's killer. You guys already know what it is, but it now you know that it was composed for. Maybe you've learned something for that. I also noticed that you have done, not only your read-alongs that you've done, which thank you by the way for inviting me to be Budget Brian for the Five Warrior Angels talks, and that was a lot of fun by the way.
Was, yeah,
Now, I noticed it's been a minute since you've done brunch and book live streams.
yeah.
What's going on with brunch and book talk?
Well, it's gonna come back.
Is it,
It's
can
just,
we get a
yeah.
comeback? Because I know I want to come back.
Yeah, I had a very busy, amazing. I had an amazing year this year, school
Yes.
year, but it was extremely busy, and I just didn't have kind of the mental things of being able to do that on the weekends. But I do want to bring that back, and I want to bring it back with one slight difference. The last one I did, I had Alan and I had the brothers Gwynn on there.
Sure.
And so our focus was kind of historical fiction.
Okay.
So when I do these, I want to do them again and make them kind of like that. So I want to try to put
It's
together,
themed.
a panel where like, hey, let's start our discussion about Dan Simmons and then go from there. Or let's start our discussion about crime fiction and Dennis Lehane and go from there. So it will come back. Probably I'm hoping to kind of reboot that sometime in July is the
Awesome.
hope. Yeah.
Awesome. No, I think it's great. And one of the things that also impresses me about you is that you're very good running a panel. I'm positive it has a lot to do with what you do for a living, that you would just assume control and you are there and you let everybody do their thing, but you keep it to where it needs to be. That's awesome. So yeah, I wanted to make a note to remind myself to say, let's make sure, that I remind Josh that Brunch and Book Talk is an awesome show.
Yeah, we'll definitely bring it back. And I know when I try to host, I try to have my guests be the focal point. So I try
Yeah.
to think of myself more as a moderator than anything else, and let them have their space. And I've really enjoyed, like one of the theme ones I had last year was authors, and I had Philip and I had Tori Tekken and PL Stewart, and it was just a lot of fun hearing them talk about the craft and giving them the space to kind of stretch out their thoughts and things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, those are a lot of fun. They'll be back.
Excellent. Excellent. Let me ask you, what role do you think BookTube, YouTube is playing today in this kind of modern literary world that we live in, which is the focus used to be all just normal bookstores. Then it was bookstores plus Amazon. Now it's a lot of self-pub stuff. Where do you see YouTube right now in terms of, the modern literary world and its impact?
Oh, I think channels my size probably don't move the needle much, but when Mike or, Jay at Caption and Words, or Daniel or Murphy, I think when they bring a lot of enthusiasm to a book or book series, it can kind of move the needle for that series. I know it's definitely for Rockio. I mean, Mike's been singing his praises for so long, and I think Rockio dedicated his last book to him.
He
So
did, yeah.
obviously that's making a big difference there. So I don't know the smaller channels like mine, if they have any impact. They probably don't. It's nice to occasionally get a book from a publisher.
Sure.
That's a really cool and flattering thing. But I think in general, I think the discussions are good. I love when I see big names like Janie Wirtz. She loves
Oh, she's
BookTube,
the
and it's
best.
it's so cool seeing someone of her stature, see what us, little people do.
Jimmy says YouTube
Yeah.
and Book Talk largely impact the publishing industry as fashion, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, and to what you were just saying, yeah, the fact that Janie Wirtz has, essentially adopted a lot of us booktubers into her world is incredible.
Yeah.
And she benefits too, because where some publishers have probably let her down over the years, through mergers and acquisitions and job redundancies and changing editors and all these things. Here's where I agree with you in some regard with like a Mike or a Murphy or a Daniel Green. Yeah, when Daniel Green all of a sudden started reading Sun Eater, all of a sudden it sold out back in, I think it was in January or
Yeah.
February, and you couldn't even get them. But I also think that if you've got a channel that's got 5,000 viewers or 7,000 viewers, and you times that by 40 booktubers that all have channels about that size, now you got 250,000 viewers. And yeah, there's some crossover and there's some, samesies that are watching it. But I think if enough of the smaller booktubers are talking about certain genres or talking about different authors, that can also move the needle, maybe a little slower, but I think that there can be an impact.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I do think of some of the books that, like Legends and Lattes,
Yeah.
self-published, and then a lot of buzz. I don't know about Book Talk. I'm not on there, so I
I'm
don't know
not.
anything about
I
that.
think.
But
I think when they start sending you the AARP cards in the mail, you're
yeah,
automatically
none of that.
you get cut off from TikTok. Like you
100%.
can't even, like, your facial recognition doesn't work anymore. All of your logins are deleted. I mean, you get a deal on a movie if you go to a movie, but
Right.
yeah, no
But
Book
but
Talk.
maybe with BookTube, I mean, that might have moved the needle enough that publishers noticed. I really don't know. I don't have enough. I don't have
Right.
anybody in the industry that I know, so it's hard to say from my perspective. But it is nice to occasionally have a book show up that you didn't know was coming, just because a publicist has your address and sent it to you. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I would think so. When we talked about your TBR before, one of the things that I meant to ask you and I forgot to ask you was, do you consider, since you've started your channel, your personal reading preferences with the expectations of what you think your viewers would like to see?
At one point I did, and then I realized that I need to just read what I want to read. And if people want to hear me talk about them, they will. And if they don't, they won't. But for me, reading is such a love, and something I love to do, and one of my favorite hobbies to do. I
Hmm.
didn't want it to seem like, okay, I have to read this book so that I can put out a review.
Right.
I think the time where I was using that logic was very short lived, because I realized I don't want this to ever turn into anything that feels other than just a fun hobby. And I
Right.
definitely don't want it to taint my reading. So my reading choices are still 100% driven by what do I most want to read.
Right, and you had mentioned earlier that that kind of brings back to the fact that if there's the hot, BookTube book of the month, you're staying the heck away from it because
Usually. I mean, like, when Legends and Lattes came out, it's like,
Yeah,
okay, well, I've seen 10 reviews of this. What can I possibly add to the conversation? Is really what I thought. So,
I have to show,
oh, hey, I
the
did.
proper respect popped in at the ears burning moment. Absolutely. Booktubers have lifted my
Oh,
books
that's
from
nice.
near invisible obscurity. Never underestimate your impact. You are a great service to the community. Huge. Even her comments are well written. Oh, she just blows me away. Um, yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, the fact that we get to have these interactions, it's incredible. And
It
I've
really is.
I've learned, I can honestly say this, of everybody that I've watched on BookTube for the last 4 years, there's nobody I've learned more from than Janny Wirtz is when she's on other interview channels. It isn't even, it's just the fountain of wisdom seems to be endless.
I love hearing artists talk about their work and their craft. It's something I never tire of. So yes, I agree. Anytime you get, a high level author that's telling you about their work and their process and all of that, it's I'm always all ears because that's something that I just love to listen to.
Oh my gosh. Have you had, you maybe alluded to this a little bit earlier, that it's very much a hobby for you to do Red Fury books. But have there been some challenges that you've encountered along the way on, on your YouTube journey that you can share with us? Maybe some of the ones that either come to mind or that you learned from, that you've made an alteration and you do things differently. Because I find that, yeah, I'm new to BookTube, but I've been watching it a while. And I always know that there's somebody that is watching this pretty new, right? I mean, there's always new people finding us. What are some of the challenges that you faced, doing this?
Lighting.
Yeah, but that's but
Lighting
that's
is the
but that's a
worst.
that's a reasonable comment because
I
that's real
think
life.
I think it took me 2 years to figure out how to properly light, and even so, it's not great. I mean, it's just that was a challenge. The times where I tried to use, I'm pretty low budget. There's times I've tried to use an external mic and this and that, and I just found, like, editing video where I had to sync audio and video, I
Mhm.
just stopped doing that because it was just such a challenge and I hated it. I shoot on my phone
Sure,
and I edit using iMovie,
sure.
and that's about it. Sometimes I might throw a Canva element in there, but that's about it. But yeah, for me early on, it was just making sure that what I said was of value. And a lot of those early videos, I don't think it was, to be honest. But the other side of it, the lighting was so hard, and then just getting the audio visual. But I mean, that's everybody's journey except your channel. Like, your video looked great from the start. So, some of you and John, I mean, your two channels, like, right away was like, wait, this
Yeah.
isn't what the typical first video from a booktuber looks like.
Right. Well, like I've said before, um, I I wasn't confident that I had enough intelligence to talk about, well, the intelligence, yes, but the breaking down of the narrative, some of the Philip Chase AP Canavan skills. I said, but what I know how to do is give something some production value. So maybe I can skate by a little bit on the content if it looks reasonably okay. And it turns out that, sure enough, I actually feel like some of the things that I, talk about from time to time actually resonate with people. So that's good. Look at this. Like, you've got a fan. Dr. Fantasy himself. Hooray
Love
for
it.
iPhone booktubers. iMovie is the only editing software I've ever used. Yeah. I mean, there's just a whole lot of, things. Like, for me, I love editing. Like you said, you're a lifelong learner, and learning for you is just a highlight of being alive. And I'm the same way. And for me, editing is something that I really want to get good at, just because I'm fascinated by it. I like being able to take an idea in my head and use a visual medium, because I can't paint. I can't draw. I'm not an artist in any sense. Oh, I can't write, but I can play piano. And with the tools of editing, maybe I can, come up with some cool visual stuff. So for me, that's been a part of this journey that I've absolutely loved. Whereas, like you and Philip, go on the iPhone, Mike, only until like the last week. Um, when he got a new editing software, has actually enjoyed editing.
Yeah.
Um, by the way, I meant to ask you, were you the brains behind the Bitcoin? Were you the one behind the takeover of Mike's book reviews? I have to ask everybody just to make sure.
No, I
Be all
think
clear,
if I took over his channel, I'd put my face on there, not some Bitcoin person.
right? Just wanted to make sure, Mike, you're on vacation, but Josh is not the brains behind the Bitcoin. So
Not at all.
refreshing to be with people who do things because they simply love to do them. Amazing energy that totally comes through in the content.
Awesome.
That's really, really cool to hear. And Janny, again, I'm
Yeah,
always going to highlight whatever she
100%.
says because I think it's valuable to people. Learning anything the first 1,000 are the hardest.
Absolutely.
Very, very true. So we know that you are a giant Stephen King fan.
Mhm.
We know you're a big Dennis Lehane fan. And let me ask you before I even get into my real question, should I do Mystic River or Small Mercies first? They're Dennis Lehane books, folks.
They're both S tier Lehane. You should do Mystic River because there's a read along on Alan's Discord in July. I'll actually be rereading it with them, so you should join us.
I wonder if I'm banned. I'll have to ask Evie if I'm banned from the Library of Alexandria. But if I'm not banned, you know,
Yeah, I just noticed that yesterday because I popped on to see when Alan wanted to read King Rat, and that's one of Clavel's
sure.
books. And
Where does that fall
I
in the
saw that.
series, by the way? Where
It's
does
it's
in
the
the Asian saga?
fourth one chronologically. So
Have
yeah.
you? Oh, Anita is. Yep, Anita. The cool part about
Hey,
Anita
nice.
is that she can override Alan at any given time.
Of course you can.
There's very little Alan can do about it.
Yeah,
We'll see if we summon to here. Wait a minute,
yeah,
Terry says if he has a holy war against me. Oh, I know.
that's true.
Believe me. Yeah, Michael says Mystic River.
Yeah,
So
it's
when are you guys doing that in July?
good. That's in July, so I don't know if your July is full yet, but
The only big thing that I've got in July is a Spiff Box book because I'm part of Team Chase for
oh,
Spiff
cool.
Box, which I'm just starting my very first one tonight, and I'm going to do Dead House Gates in July. But I think, and I'm going to do whatever my community picks for me. We do a poll in the community tab, and they pick one. So whatever they pick, I'll do. But then that does leave room for Mystic River. So according to Anita, I'm not banned, which is
It's
fantastic.
it's only just looking at it on the shelf. It's only about 400 pages.
Oh,
It reads really well, but his writing is just he transcends the genre. I'm actually rereading that and a bunch of the ones I read a long time ago because I want to do a longer form Lehane video by the end of the year. So I'm doing some rereading, and that's one I wanted to reread. And if my memory serves, that's probably my favorite of all of them.
really.
It's very good. Yeah.
I'm not much of a rereader. I think it's a little bit of FOMO that I always want to get to, the next book. When you reread mystery, is it a little bit different knowing that because I mean, obviously you're not going to remember every detail of a book you read 15 years ago, but I would imagine that once you get to a certain point in the book, it starts to come back to you a bit.
It depends on the author.
Okay.
I think an author where it's more than just the plot, like Lehane, a reread can be very valuable because the first time for me reading a book, you're just trying to see what happens next. So when you reread an author where there's a lot more than just the plot going on, even though you know what's happening next, you're going to notice a lot more. In Lehane's case, you're probably going to notice just the depth of character, a lot of the deeper themes that are in there. He's great at just kind of painting societal picture, a broader picture of things. He does it so well, and his writing style is just incredible for that genre in particular. So I don't think that works with every crime writer. I
Right.
won't name names because I don't want to be negative, but I know certain
Sure.
crime writers that you would probably read it and you wouldn't be able to reread it. It's kind of like, let me give you a TV example.
Yeah.
I think if you rewatch The Wire or The Shield or any of those really, really good cop
Right.
dramas, they're going to be gratifying. But if you rewatch Criminal Minds, is it going to be the same? Probably not.
Right. Flavor of the week type of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get that. If you this is kind of where I was going with before I got distracted with the Dennis Lehane, but I know you've got, some of your big favorites. If you could sit down at dinner with three living authors
Oh,
off the top of your head, Josh, Red
okay.
Fury Books, three living authors, who's at that dinner with you?
Stephen King, Robin Hobb, and Joe Abercrombie.
I like that answer.
Yeah, Abercrombie'd be a lot of fun.
Right? Exactly. I mean, just he's good for some shots, right? I mean,
I'm sure.
yeah. All right, let's change the question a little bit. Deceased authors, same question, 3 of them.
Hmm.
If you're bringing them back from the dead and they're not ghosts.
Steinbeck, Tolkien, and Frank Herbert.
I like that too. That would be an excellent mix. I bet you Frank Herbert and Tolkien would have quite a bit to talk about. Were they contemporaries? I mean,
I
did they?
No, I think Herbert was a lot later. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I couldn't have been that much later though. I don't know. Philip would know. Oh my gosh. So in your we've talked about how you have all kinds of here you go. There you go. Whoops. Here you go. Now you're going to
Ah,
have a hell of a dinner.
yeah, right.
There's going to be some arguments at that dinner for sure. I wonder yeah, interesting. Yeah, Britain says the same thing.
We could have
And
could have stirred even more. Have Tolkien and Frank Herbert and well, Michael Moorcock's still alive, so I guess that doesn't work.
yeah,
Oh well.
yeah, that's hilarious. You do, yeah, and here's Jandy saying it will end in a food fight.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Are there any genres that you haven't touched yet that have interest for you? Or are you
I don't.
pretty
I,
comfortable with, you have such, I said, like a broad, wide spread, and not only wide, but you read deep into these genres too. It's very impressive.
I mean, there's some genres I've read very little and don't really want to read more. Um, like romance genre, yeah, I'll read some Jane Austen just because her command of the English language is so good, and I marvel at that.
Sure.
Um, but that's not a genre that I necessarily enjoy. I'm not interested in a lot of mainstream modern fiction that
Okay.
are about the people and the relationships and Jonathan Franz and that kind of thing, where every character is like the most tragic creature on the earth. Like I like my fiction to be a bit more escapist, I guess.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things. But I've read, I mean, at least as far as fiction is concerned, I think I've read pretty pretty widely. At least
Yeah.
I've dabbled at least a little bit here and there.
Has it been like that most of your life, or is that kind of a newer thing that you've picked up lots of different genres?
So I read primarily fantasy from 6th grade to about college. And then
Okay.
college, you don't have time to read much. The
Right.
summers in college, I remember reading Stephen King
Okay.
primarily. And then when I got out of school, I didn't go back to fantasy. That's when I kind of explored a lot of these other genres. And I really didn't read fantasy for about 15, 18 years.
Really? What got you
And,
back?
well, what brought me back was part of it was BookTube. Part of it was pandemic. I had time on my hands, and a friend said, "Hey, you should finally," because he'd been bugging me for about a decade. "You have time now. Read The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan." So I picked up the first book, and it was very familiar to me
Yeah.
because it's fellowship,
Yeah.
and I plowed through the Wheel of Time in like 3 months, and I
Same
loved
here.
it. And that's really what brought me back. And then I started watching BookTube and hearing all these other author names I'd never heard of, Brandon Sanderson and, Joe Abercrombie and Robin
Right.
Hobb and all these voices that I had missed. So even now, even though I do read at least 3, 4 genres a month, half of what I read is fantasy because
Right.
I've still been playing a lot of catch up because for about 18 years, the only new stuff I read was George R. R. Martin and Harry Potter.
It's very different, but very
Yeah.
but excellent books as well. Did you read George R. R. Martin as the books were coming out, or were you a little bit later to the game on that?
No, I was a bit later, so I haven't been waiting for Winds of Winter quite as long. I think I started them when the fourth book came out, whatever year that
Feast of
was.
Crows, yeah, Feast
Yeah,
for
yeah.
Crows.
When that book came out, that's when I started.
Sure.
So, yeah, I've been a little later the game. Didn't start like a lot of people did when it first came out.
Right. My brother-in-law got me into it, so I was pretty much there right at the beginning of it. But I remember reading A Dance with Dragons in my office in the nightclub the day that it came out with the pounding subwoofers just blaring below. And I've just got like my earbuds on with like some white noise in the background so I
Yeah,
can read, Dance with Dragons. Complete, completely crazy.
nice.
Um, so you talked about, and I know you've done a little bit with, like I saw, like you invited me on with John and Usman when you did the Five Warrior Angel trilogies, and you talked about doing this read along on Ellen's Discord for Reread Mystic River. Do you
Mhm.
have any other plans for a book club or anything happen on the Fireside Discord that you think might happen for the summer?
Not immediately. I mean, I have thoughts here and there. At some point, John and I are going to read Sarantine Mosaic, and some
Sure,
others. People join us on that as well. But
I might do
nothing,
that with
nothing
you.
in the
Yeah,
plan. I want to read. I do want to do a Dark Tower reread. So I don't know if that'll be next year or not, and I might do that as a read along on the Fireside. Right now, what I'm trying to do is knock down that physical TBR to a more manageable level. So I'm trying not to get entangled in too many read alongs or buddy reads or anything like that right now.
unless you absolutely already own the book and
Yeah,
it's just been
yeah.
sitting there and waiting for you, and Tolkien would hate BookTube.
Probably.
But he would love Dr. Philip Chase, The Best of Fantasy. I mean, he would just watch that on repeat,
Yeah.
totally on a loop for sure. Philip, what can I say? Even, yeah, maybe. Oh my gosh. So tell me a little bit about the Discord, because some of our viewers tonight and some of the people watching later on Team Replay might not know a lot about the Fireside Discord. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Fireside Discord, it's I think we have about 300 members, and it's just a nice little cozy corner of all of these discords that go around. We founded it with Joanna and Matt from Matt on Books, and the three of us just put this together, and we just invited our communities, and it's been a lot of fun, just the different discussions and getting to know different people. As much as in the comment sections of our videos, we can have conversations, and that's nice. You can have a lot more in-depth conversations on the discords, and it's been a lot of fun. And it's just kind of a cozy corner, and we just kind of started it because we were all kind of part of some bigger discords that
Hmm.
just felt a little overwhelming. I mean, like,
Yeah.
the first time I went to Mike's Discord, I was just like, I don't know what to do. This is scary. What do I do? So Fireside's kind of a cozy little corner, and we like it. It's been a lot of fun.
And that was a question that actually came up in my Patreon. It was is they said, how do I navigate a Discord? Because same as you, I was very new to Discord, and the first one I ever went to was Mike's.
Yeah,
And if you are unfamiliar with Discord, it can be quite overwhelming and you
yeah,
don't really know where things are. I think for somebody who's new to Discord and likes the content on your channel and Matt's channel, Matt, you need to start making videos, my man. I'm messaging you later. More than the Sunday pub. And Joanna's for sure, who also, by the way, is coming on the show in July, which is going to be a blast because
cool.
I've never talked in any conversation with Joanna before. So I think musician and musician to
Mhm.
musician, maybe we'll have to get the trifecta going
There we
uh,
go.
what one of these days. But I really do appreciate the fact that you named the Discord in the manner of that, like you said, that kind of cozy spot of Discord itself, because it does feel like that to me when I go
Yeah,
there.
and we purposely organized it so it wouldn't be, 5,000 channels on there where you're just kind of confused as to what's going on. We tried to be really mindful about how we structured it so it would feel more inviting for people that are doing it for the first time.
Yeah. And I would really encourage for anybody who's watching, if you've not joined their Discord, especially if you're brand new to Discord and you want, kind of a simple approach to it with people that are running the channel that are legitimately great people. Yeah, you can't go wrong with Matt, Josh, and Joanna for sure. So one of the questions that I kind of ask everybody is, there are people out there that are thinking about doing BookTube, and you may know them. They may have commented on your videos. Maybe they've just kind of secretly watched and they are fans of yours, and you've inspired them in some way to do this type of a thing. What advice do you give somebody who's contemplating it?
Do it.
So that's
Plain and simple. Just turn on the camera and do it. I mean, 99.9% of us that do this, we just do it because whatever we're talking about, we love. And if you have a love of something that you want to share, just share away and get involved in the community. That's probably the best advice for anyone that's trying to start a channel and wants it to grow. Because I know it's very common for all of us when we see someone that's contributing a lot or getting in conversations and we haven't seen their content before, and then we see, oh, they have a video, you're going to be more likely to go check it out. So
sure.
yeah, I would say don't hesitate and realize that there will be a learning curve. There are things that you'll probably do really well from the start, and there are things you'll have to learn. And I learn a lot from watching the other channels and seeing what everybody does, whether it's how they light something or how they structure something, or this person shot some B-roll. I could do that too,
Yeah.
the thing. So, I just wouldn't hesitate to do it because most of us, like the Steel Mike's line, we're just guys with Wi-Fi.
Right.
We're not experts here. We just love literature. We love books. We love
Right.
talking about it.
And
So
it constantly
join
amazes
us
me.
and be part of it. I mean, it's fun.
It amazes me that people actually listen to what I say and take my book recommendations. I will be doing for however long this channel exists. I will always be amazed that people actually listen to book recommendations of mine. So everybody, I promised Josh we'd probably keep it to about an hour and a half tonight. So that's what we're going to do. But we do a couple things here at the end of each episode that I want to get to. Of course, Josh's channel is linked in the description. I am positive 99% of you are probably subscribed to his channel, but for that 1% of you out there that is not, do yourself a favor, not because I'm telling you to. Okay, yes, because I'm telling you to. It's worth your time. He makes really good videos. They're very well thought out, and they're a lot of fun too. And I walk away from Josh's videos learning something and glad for having spent the time with him for however long his videos are. So his link is for sure in the description. If you like this video, if you like BellTube, hit the thumbs up button because it helps YouTube show us to more people. Our BellTube community is growing. If you haven't subbed to the channel yet, there's like 40% of the people who watch our channel aren't subbed yet. You can do it. I'm not going to steal John's line, but it feels something when you do it. Can't steal from my brother John. And you can share it. And of course, we do have a Patreon. I've kind of put the pricing down to a more, I think, manageable level. And I got a little bit ahead of myself, if I'm being honest, when I started it. So I've dropped it down to make it a little bit, more reasonable and easier for people to support if they like. But all of that said, you know how we end videos here on BellTube. We have a segment called One for the Road. And on For Whom the Bell Tolls, it has become custom that our guest provide the one for the road. So Josh, Red Fury Books, one of my favorite booktubers and one of the nicest, genuine human beings I've met on this platform. Would you leave us with a one for the road tonight?
Gladly. So my one for the road is something I've learned as a teacher. I just finished my 25th year as an educator. And I call it don't tell yourself a story. There's a lot of times in life when we see someone that does something that is not appropriate or is acting out or something like that. And this can be a kid or an adult. And we kind of tell ourselves a story that, oh, he's doing that because. But the fact is, we never know why somebody else is doing something. We should never make assumptions about why somebody's doing something. So, like with a student, they're acting out because blah, blah, blah. Well, maybe they're acting out because they didn't have breakfast, or maybe they're acting out because their parents are fighting. We really
Sure.
don't know. And for us to assume things is a bad thing. So I always remind myself, if in life, whether it's a student or not, and there's a inappropriate behavior, I don't tell myself a story why, because I don't. I instead try to seek to understand and empathize and try to understand why someone would act like that, because chances are the story I would tell myself is incorrect. So don't tell yourself a story.
That is fantastic. It is absolutely one of the better one for the roads, certainly of the ones that I've done, right up there with some of the ones that we've gotten from other guests before. And I think that there's great value there. And I think that does come from 25 years of being an educator. It comes from a few more years of that of life. And, like you said, you're a lifelong learner. And that's absolutely something that a lifelong learner would come to realize. Josh, thank you so much for being on tonight's episode. I've been looking forward to this chat for a very long time, and you make this easy. And I've talked to Jimmy about this before, and 9/10 of the battle in doing a live stream is who's your guest. If your guest is engaging and your guest is fun and your guest brings value to the audience, it makes my job real easy. So thank you for making my job very easy tonight, Josh.
My pleasure.
It's
Truly.
it's been awesome, and I hope you'd be willing to come back for a part 2 one of these days.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime.
Very cool. Everybody, chat, thank you for being here. You guys have been fantastic. You've brought life to our stream. Thanks to everybody on replay. And next week, the bell will be tolling for the one and only making her return to BookTube, Madison Goodyear.
Nice.
So, if you are friends with Madison, if you have been wondering what she's been up to, 6 p.m. Central Time. See how I called that back, John Minton? Central Time callback. Thank you guys. It's been a blast. I'll see you next Wednesday for Madison. Have a good night, everybody.